Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon, and today we have a very interesting guest. We have retired first-grade detective Bill Ryan of the Arson and Explosion Squad. And most police departments don't have an Arson and Explosion Squad because maybe just the largest cities do. But New York City, of course, being the largest police department in the world, has an Arson Explosion Squad, and they investigate just what it says, fires and explosions. And Bill Ryan had a very eclectic career. He worked in plainclothes in the citywide street crime unit. He went into the narcotics, and he had a plethora, I love that word, of investigative experience. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Bill Ryan.
Good morning. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
And I also forgot to mention that he has a private investigative firm right now. Called, what is it? It's called William Ryan and Associates.
It's actually Ryan Investigative Group.
Ryan Investigative Group. He's probably the group, so don't let him fool you.
Well, the way I'm gaining weight, I could be the group.
So one of the things I think a lot of people would like to know is that Arson Explosion, what is the training for that? How do you get prepared to become an arson and explosion investigator?
That's an excellent question, Bill. People, a lot of people don't even know arson explosion exists. It's actually one of the oldest details in the department. It was before the terrorist task force and before a lot of other squads. There was an arson and explosion squad. When I first joined the squad in '93, we were more bureau type investigators. The fire marshals would go out and say, this is an arson. They'd send us the results, and we would do the follow-up investigation. And just as I had gotten there, our former commanding officer, Jerry Sheehan, wanted to get us training. And, there's always a little bit of the battle of the badges. The fire marshals didn't want us, well, the chief fire marshal at the time didn't want us going to their origin and cause schools. And it's kind of funny because the NYPD actually trains the fire marshals in law and justification and firearms. So it's very, we're all the same employer, the city of New York, but they weren't happy with that. So what ended up happening was Jerry got us to go to the New York State Fire Academy in Montauk Falls, New York, and ended up going there. And you're up there for a week. You have the training on how to determine origin and cause. It's a tested class. You go in, great instructors, and it's great because you meet investigators from all over New York State. We had a few Canadians there, a couple guys from Rhode Island.
And
it was real interesting.
Canadians,
Yeah, Canadians, And I asked him, do you have the Dudley Do-Right suit at home? He goes, no, we don't wear that.
Yeah.
A little disappointed. But that was where we went. And when you go there for a period of time and you get your training, and then you have to submit to the state your list of fires and what you did on it, and they should send it to them, and they go over it, and if they feel you've qualified for it, you become what's a level 1 fire investigator, which is kind of step 1, and then you can keep going on and becoming a level 2, and there's a tremendous amount of courses. But it's also, and this is a tribute to the commitment the NYPD had to training. They would send us to all the federal schools for arson and bombings investigations. And it was really great. It was a little bit, of a thing with the marshals, where a lot of times we actually had better, I'll call them academic credentials than they did, because most of them just had their vast experience in the fire department. And some of them went to these classes too, but most of the guys in A&E had better fire training. And there was, and they always thought we were going to take them over. I'm like, we're 12 guys. We're not taking over anything.
But something, when you get grilled on the stand by a savvy defense attorney, you want to have the education and the background to be able to speak in an authoritarian way about your topic or your area of expertise.
You do. And, it's funny. One of the cracks Jerry Sheen used to tell us all the time, our former CO, is that what's an expert? And he said, a guy 50 miles from home with a slideshow. Having a real expertise and being able to articulate that expertise on the stand, which is the key. You can go up and hand them your resume or your CV, but some guys are just stiff on the stand and they can't really they've got the knowledge here. They just can't put it out in front of 12 people. And you know, that's a problem a lot of times. I've got a performing background. I'm pretty good on the stand, so I enjoyed it. But you know, it's still something you have to know what you're talking about, because if not, they can use your information to try to overturn what the other guy did, you know, and well, he says it's an apple and you're saying it's an orange, you know.
Well, you know, part of being a good investigator on the stand is to know where the inquisitor is going, like anticipatory questions. You understand the process. So you understand where the attorney who's grilling you, where that person is going, so you don't trip yourself up when you can think 2 steps ahead where he's trying to get what he's trying to get you to say, for example.
Absolutely.
You know,
the old bit, you know, when you think you're doing, when your attack is going that well, sometimes it's a trap. You know, he's looking down that alley, and then when you get to the end of it, he's waiting for you. But that's like, you know, with any investigation, whether it's, you know, something forensic or just basic street cop stuff, you know, you have to know your case, and you got to know your weaknesses, and you've got to make sure that the DA knows the weaknesses in your case. You know, a lot of times guys get up on the stand and they expect the prosecutor to save them, or the attorney in a civil matter to save them. You know, at the end of the day, you know, you're up there on your own. It's your credibility. And, you know, I one of the things I did while I was still a cop is I used to teach interview and interrogation and courtroom testimony at the police academy. And I used to tell guys, you know, I'll go down to Center Street at the sign-in room and everybody's reading, you know, the sports section, or, you know, they're talking to their girlfriends or their wives on the phone, but they haven't even, you know, gone over their own arrest report and memo book. And I said, the guy's going to question you. He's been up all night preparing, waiting for you to do that.
right.
And, you know, you've got to know your stuff, you know, no matter what it is. If it's something as complicated as a fire or a bombing case, or, you know, something as pedestrian as like a pickup baseball bat robbery, you know, I mean.
Well, you know, one of the things that people that aren't in the police world don't understand is that you don't just become a great detective. There's some steps, there's preparation for that. And some of the preparation for that, of course, is to be a good police officer.
Absolutely.
Police officers do investigations. They, you know,
all the time.
Yeah, they go to a scene, and even to take a report or to interview someone is part of it being an investigator, not specifically giving that title investigator, but you do a lot of investigations as a police officer. So to be a good police officer, then the natural progression, it used to be to go into anti-crime at the precinct level. And that's where a lot of some of the best cops, best detectives came from, was anti-crime, and of course, citywide anti-crime, street crime.
Yeah, baby.
I was in street crime also.
As was I.
Yeah, you were exposed to some unbelievable crimes on the street that begged out for not just good street police work, but good investigation in the follow-up. And that's how, you know, people cut their teeth and became good investigators. And that's the best anti-crime cops, in my mind, became some of the best detectives.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny when we talk about, you know, and this is not an insult at the fire marshals. I have no axe to grind with them, although they have the axes. Maybe they'll grind it. You know, when you become a fire marshal, unlike a detective, as you know, is a discretionary rank. A fire marshal is a civil service title. They take examinations, they pass them, and after they pass, they go to the training at the fire academy on Randall's Island, New York. Then they assign them to a fire base when they work with a senior guy for a while, and then they're out there on their own. So, I mean, a lot of them are very good at going into a scene and saying, here's how the fire started, here's where it started, here's the evidence. But a lot of times they're a little light on the police work because they haven't done that, you know, where you and I are running around in a radio car answering jobs and filling out 61s and talking to witnesses. You know, they were on the back of a truck putting out fires and saving lives. So it's different. They've got a different learning curve, you know, and and you know, some of the fire marshals are actually retired cops or guys who rolled over, but it does make a difference. And like I said, there's some that are amazing. Some fire marshals I think are great, and you know, and some they're great at this part of the job, but a little less great at the other side of the job.
Well, knowing what to look for, and I was never great. I was really good at the police part of doing my job, because I was an anti-crime guy for 6.5 years, and once as a cop and as a sergeant, and I became a good investigator, but I was never great at the crime scene part of it. And I always thought that was the scientific part, and how great the New York City Police Department has a crime scene unit that will do all that work for you. But then I understood later in my career that to put a really good case together, you needed to really understand what crime scene was doing so that you could guide them in the collection of evidence of what may have happened at the scene of a homicide, what may have happened at the scene of an assault, because it's not good enough to just let them come in and take control of the scene. You have to tell them or advise them as what do you think occurred.
As the investigative detective, use the word, the scene, ultimately, if you're the catching detective, it's your scene.
Right.
I mean, there may be the brass and crime scene and 100 other people there, but if you're the one, catching, it's your case. And, you can't assume somebody did something on a case. You can't, there's certain things that you want done. Ask, I've always had a great relationship with the guys in crime scene. If you ask them to do it, they're happy to do it for you. But, don't just go, all right, you guys got the scene, I'm leaving, I'm going to go do an interview, and say, why wasn't this done?
No, you got to do the walkthrough with them. You got to find out through talking to them what they think happened, and come up, because it can be in the beginning at a homicide crime scene a hypothesis, an educated guess as to what occurred, and you use
Absolutely.
science to determine the best course of action and what we think occurred.
And sometimes, especially when you do specialized investigations like we do, there may be things at the scene that everyone's looking at that I don't think that maybe they won't think is important in the traditional crime scene sense, but it's invaluable to me. So, hey, get pictures of this, let's seize that. Let's, that's really important. And it's not always, the bullet or the blood stain or some of the things that we more traditionally see as police officers. I mean, there's been things in cases like pictures on the wall, things that I want, or, things maybe the kid had on his desk, books that he was looking at back when people looked at books instead of the internet. There's a lot of things that could get passed over if you don't know what to look. I mean, I've had devices made out of odd things, and was that significant? Like one guy was using a milk container for something. Would it have been significant? Not unless I said, hey, that's important to me. Get pictures of that. Let's seize these things and get them printed. Or, even the guy like Edward Leary, who you probably remember, he was the guy that tried to hold the city hostage by setting off incendiary devices on the subways.
Right.
Went and did the search of his house up in Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn. He had all these mason jars and pottery jars and things. And people were like, why are you seizing that? I said, because that's what the original devices were made out of, and we want to show that he had access to these things. People are like, oh, you're seizing jars. I've got jars. Yes, but if you've got the guys making bombs, and most of the guys make bombs out of what's handy. But
you're also thinking way ahead when this case goes to trial, and show the jury that he collected these jars for a very specific reason.
Exactly.
And as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, or a physical piece of evidence.
The actual item that you can bring and go, aha.
Piece of evidence says a lot of things. I wanted to mention one thing, which I would probably be remiss, and I know you weren't in Arson and Explosion at the time, because I believe it happened in 1990. And of course, that was one of the biggest arsons in the history of the city, which was the Happy Land fire. And
I wasn't there for that. I was in narcotics at the time.
Right, that was in 1990, I believe, because I had just made sergeant. And one of the duties that they gave us when we hit the street was every night we had to visit every social club.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of a sudden they discovered there were social clubs that weren't licensed in the city. You want to just talk a little about Happy Land and about what occurred?
Yeah, I mean, again, I wasn't there. I was in Brooklyn North TNT when when Happy Land occurred. But I mean, basically what happened was, it was a nightclub. It had, one way in, one way out. And without getting too much into it, you had a guy who had his girlfriend upstairs, or who he thought it was his girlfriend, and the bouncers kicked him out because he was misbehaving. And he went and, got a couple of bucks worth of gasoline, and he set fire to the place. And, 86 people died in that, and in this big fire. But what's interesting is, nobody burned in this fire. Everybody died of asphyxiation. People were trampled getting out. So even though, yes, it was a fire, it was an arson, nobody died from burns. Everybody died from either smoke or getting trampled on.
Isn't that the case in most fires, that most people don't die from the fire, they die from smoke inhalation?
Yeah. Because it takes nothing. I mean, there's so many toxins that get released in a fire. You think about your own house. I mean, just how many plastic things, and when these plastic things get heated and start melting, and mattresses and everything, they give off a lot of toxic chemicals, and you get a good couple of lungfuls of that. It's going to take you down, and eventually you're going to pass away from it unless you can get out of there. But that's true. Most people who die in fires die from the smoke, or the asphyxiation, the things from the smoke.
I mean, that was a horrendous case. 86 people dying. It's
yeah, it was
almost.
It's funny. We I'm not going to get too much into it, but we came about that close to having a second one in Astoria. It wasn't my case. It was one of my teammates, Kevin McManus, who's retired now, and it was a Greek club, and almost the same thing happened, and it got thwarted, and it didn't end up happening. But pretty close to having Happy Land Part 2, because it takes nothing to do these things. I mean, a couple of bucks of gas, and
well, it's inexcusable to have one entrance, one exit. You have to have multiple areas of escape in any, especially a club.
Well, you're supposed to. I mean, there are laws that regulate this, but it's like the old scene from Casablanca. I'm shocked there's gambling going on. It's like I'm shocked there's illegal social clubs.
Well, you've seen clubs that'll chain the doors.
No.
I mean, that's like 100% no, but they do it.
Yeah, I believe me. It's it's just by the grace of God that a lot more of these things don't happen. But of course, now in the city, nobody can get into clubs or anything, and everything's closed down. So,
well, one of the things that they've done in the last probably 10, 15 years is large clubs at the door, they scan your license. And most of these clubs, if you don't have a license, you're not getting in. And that's how strict the security's gotten. And I think that's great. Because
a lot of that came from, you remember the young woman that was, she was the John Jay student who was killed by one of the bouncers.
Met Senguin, yes.
Yeah. And when that happened, not to talk too much about it, but, there was a whole revamping of security guard. I mean, it's funny, but in New York State, I think it was 1986 where they actually created the Security Guard Act, where you actually had to be somehow licensed and fingerprinted. I mean, before that, anybody could just, I'm a security guard and just go in. And
I work out at Gold's Gym. I'm a good security guard, right? Or, I mean, just think that restaurant, The Falls, where Met Senguin was sort of kidnapped from, hired a serial rapist as their bouncer. No, nothing wrong with that.
I don't doubt it at all.
A serial rapist they hired as the bouncer.
Yeah, I mean, you think about what a great, if you're that type of a predator, you've got young women going into clubs, they're drinking, they trust you a little bit because of the bouncer, get me a cab, it's,
And do you know what the connection the restaurant, The Falls, had with another infamous bar on the Upper East Side?
I don't.
Dorian's Red Hand.
Dorian's.
Which was the last bar that Jennifer Levin and Robert Chambers were in prior to him murdering her. The father owned Dorian's Red Hand and the son owned The Falls. I don't know their last name, but there's sort of an infamous connection there,
You can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't.
Actually, I'm a writer. I can, but
And make it up. So I wanted to, one of your cases, I want to see if I can share the screen here. I'm not good at this stuff, so let's see if we can do it. But there's a serial arsonist case.
yeah, that was my first one. That was.
I'm going to play it right now.
His request for money. He would have an argument with his mother. He would come down and initiate arsons on people who may have turned them down for funds at one time or another in the area.
Indeed, it seems the arsons at clearly Jewish targets were not bias crimes at all.
He has a great affinity toward the Jewish community. In fact, when he would set these fires, he frequently wear a yarmulke, just out of whatever persuasion that provided him with.
Peter Roth is the vice president of one of the synagogues hit.
I was expecting that when they caught the guy, he'd be some kind of like hardcore neo-Nazi type. And I saw this guy when they brought him out today. He just looks like a real sad schlemieli.
Schlemiel, I love that word.
Remove that fear of bias, that we in our community have a situation where people are violent because of a biased situation. If this was eliminated, it certainly makes us feel very, very much more comfortable.
Yeah, that was Rabbi Reiner. He had given money to Bevick in the past. When he stopped giving money, Bevick allegedly began to harass the rabbi. Police investigating that harassment elicited Bevick's confession for the arsons today. Reporting live in Far Rockaway, Jim Dolan, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Some well spoke for setting fires at Jewish institutions in Rockaway, Cleveland, but they say bias was not the motive. They described the suspect, 39-year-old Brian Bevick, as a...
That's me, young and thin. More hair, dark hair, and
Look at that. Look at
a
that.
porno mustache.
We got that.
The latest blaze was this past weekend at a synagogue. Police believe Bevick may be responsible for as many as 16 arson fires.
A fast-moving Fox say they have caught the man who spread hate and fear by setting synagogues on fire. Glenn Thompson is live right now in Rockaway with the very latest on this story for us. Glenn.
Well, Connie, this historic synagogue was one of the last to be torched back in April. It was also one of the first to be torched in July of last year. And you can see some of the extensive damage that's been done here. Well, tonight, an intensive arson investigation has finally paid off, and police say they have their man. This is the arsonist who's terrorized the Jewish community in Rockaway, Queens.
God, was I ever that young?
Oh my God.
James Bevick has been charged in connection with...
What we're seeing on the screen is the walkout with the perp for you, those that are just listening to this and not seeing the video.
He's being charged with 7 counts each of arson in the 3rd degree and reckless endangerment in the 1st degree, and 1 count of attempted arson in the 3rd degree.
Bevick was arrested at his mother's Brooklyn home, where he admitted to detectives that he set the fires. Police say they received their biggest break this week when they learned that Bevick had been making harassing phone calls to one of the synagogues and demanding money. They say Bevick frequently was given handouts from several synagogues.
He made several $100s a week, basically, by soliciting funds from the institutions here. But occasionally he would be turned down. And when he did, and he had a disagreement with his mother, he would vent his disagreement by setting these fires.
Rabbi Jacob Reiner received more than 100 harassing calls from Bevick.
I mean, he was angry because we didn't have money available for him. And that's the way he reacted in anger. For harassment. I called the office, he called my home. There was one night that I was never sleep.
Detectives say that despite outward appearances, this wasn't a bias crime. They say, in fact, Bevick may have had a Jewish father and was sympathetic to Jews. They say he even wore a yarmulke while setting the fires. While his motives may not be clear, the damage is very apparent.
On one hand, very sad, everybody disturbed, but on the other hand, it did give a certain flourishment to the community in its determination to survive and to carry on.
Bevick now faces up to 15 years in prison on each of the arson.
Well, Bill, now that we saw you did once have brown hair and many years.
Well, I can still get it for you. I mean, I can hit the bathroom and
the Grecian Formula 44.
Whatever you need.
So you want to comment on that case? Or?
Yeah, it's when I first got to A&E, I got there in January of '93, and I kind of had a really kind of remarkable beginning, because about the 3rd or 4th case I ended up getting was the 93 Trade Center bombing. And so literally your rookie season, you're playing in the Super Bowl. And we were just tied up with that for so long, and I hadn't gone to the fire schools yet. And, A&E was only about a dozen detectives, 2 sergeants and a lieutenant. So, it's not that big of a squad that covers the entire city. And when this case had come in, I had never done a serial case. I don't think any of the guys that I was working with at the time had done a serial case. And this was like July 12th of 1994. We had the fire to Durakimona, which is it's on Beach 67th Street. And it's like that building in the middle of all the elephant grass. And it's like a little shul on the prairie. There's nothing around it. It's one of the oldest synagogues in the country. And he did a fire in the back of the place, knocked out a lot of damage, but it was still somewhat repairable. The thing is, the congregation was old people that wasn't there that often. And while we're working on that, the fire marshals come over to us and go, hey, while this place was burning, down in the 100th precinct, there was a fire to a Jewish hotel, the Washington Irving Hotel. And, we started realizing that we had the same guy, or possibly a same guy because of the way they were done. And then some detectives from, at the time, it was the bias investigating unit. Now it's the hate crime unit. One of the detectives there, Edward Schaffberg, who eventually became my partner in arson, he goes, hey, these fires have been going on in Long Island. Ed was a volunteer fireman in one of the Long Island departments. Mm-hmm. Goes, this has been going on in Atlantic Beach and Long Beach for, I think at the time it was at least a year, similar fires. So it looked like our arsonist was a Long Island guy now spreading through the peninsula and now coming into Queens and becoming our headache. And, now you're sitting there and go, okay, well, how do I do this? And I always said I became the serial guy because nobody else wanted the job.
Could you speak to the personality traits of a serial arsonist? Do they have a certain type of personality? Like, they talk about with serial killers, organized and disorganized offenders. Is certain personalities also true with arsonists, serial arsonists? Well,
I mean, there's different types of serial arsonists, and people do serial arsons for different reasons. I'd spent some time talking to a guy named Carl Englund, who was the ATF profiler. And, from what I'm told by their research, and this is their research, I don't want to look like I'm taking credit for it, but a pattern arson, serial arson guy, his profile is almost the same as that of a serial sex offender. And I don't know if this is true or not, but he was telling me that I think there's rarely been a serial murder or serial homicide where the guy wasn't already a serial arsonist. Berkowitz was an arsonist. I won't go through a litany of names, but people do it for different reasons. Some guys are you get a lot of security guards and cops and firefighters who've become arsonists because they want to play the hero, and I think they're addicted to look how great I am, look at what I did. Is there a real fire setting behavior, like a pyromania? I mean, I just don't think that the research has been that conclusive. I mean, some things I've read, from old studies talked about, a correlation between bedwetting and arsonist, and the studies really haven't been that great.
Well, they like to sort of try to fit things in a neat container. Like a lot of serial killers, when they do research on them, they found out that they like to kill animals, small animals, when they were a child, and that's sort of a psychological, thing that they do. And I'm sure arsonists have other traits that, similar to what serial killers have.